morning. All right. Here you go, Kelly. Hey, I'm Mike Gould. Had a chance to meet most of you. I think I serve as the president, or actually just the CEO. My title has changed here recently. I'm the CEO of the Air Force Academy Association of Graduates and Foundation. And along with my bride, Paula, and our team from the AOG and the foundation, I'm honored to kick this off here today. This is the second of our DC activities this weekend. We had a fun time last night at Top Golf, and no injuries that I've heard of. Nobody is threatening the PGA Tour because of our thing last night, but it was fun, and we're really glad to have you all here today. The weekend is about lots of things. It's about the launch of our comprehensive campaign that the AOG and the foundation will be running for the next several years. But this morning here is really about getting everybody to focus on our Air Force Academy and the phenomenal work they've done over the years, preparing leaders to go out and lead in our country, in the military and beyond. And we're going to do that by highlighting some grads who have accomplished an awful lot. We have three different panels, one on on emerging technologies, another one on athletics, and finally one on leadership. And it's going to be a lot of fun. I think you'll have a chance to maybe get involved with a question or two. But to keep this rolling and to get right on into it, I'd like to introduce Kelly Shelton, who runs the Corporate and Foundation Directorate in the foundation. And Kelly will serve as the moderator for this first section. And we'll take some breaks. There's plenty of food out there. And if you need to get up and grab something, please do. But for now, over to you, Kelly. Thank you.
Thank you, General Gould. Well, good morning, everyone. So like General Gould said, I'm Kelly Shelton, Development Director for Corporate and Foundation Relations for the Foundation. Thank you for being here this morning. And I am honestly beyond honored to host this panel. Such an elite group of folks that I'm sitting next to. So thank you so much for being here. This morning, we're going to kick it off talking about some emerging technologies. So I'm going to start by introducing our panelist. We have Mr. Mark Cherry, who is a 1991 Air Force Academy graduate and currently serves as Vice President and General Manager of Vertical Lift, which is a division within Boeing Defense, Space and Security. He is responsible for a portfolio of rotorcraft capabilities and aircraft. And prior to this position, he oversaw Boeing's Phantom Works division that is responsible for engaging customers through cutting-edge visual modeling and simulation, innovative cross-cutting concepts and technology, prototyping solutions to extend current products and win new programs, and developing new businesses and entering new markets. He has more than 20 years of aerospace leadership experience working on leading-edge technologies at several organizations, including United Technologies, Teradyne Inc., and Boston Consulting Group. Welcome, Mr. Cherry. We have Lieutenant Colonel retired Kelly Latimer, who is a 1987 Air Force Academy graduate and retired United States Air Force Lieutenant Colonel. She was the first ever female research pilot to join the NASA Armstrong Flight Research Center. She was Virgin Orbit's pilot in command for their first rocket launch in January 2021. Latimer flew the T-38, T-34, Lockheed C-141 Starlifter, Boeing C-17, 747 shuttle carrier aircraft, and the Stratospheric Observatory for Infrared Astronomy, 747 SP. She has logged more than 6,500 flight hours and 1,000 test flight hours in her work with NASA, Boeing, and the Air Force. Welcome, Colonel Latimer. And last but certainly not least, Lieutenant General retired B.J. Shwedo, class of 1987 for the Air Force Academy. and served as Director for Command, Control, and Communications and Computers, Cyber, and Chief Information Officer of the Joint Staff. Prior to that, he was the Chief of Information Dominance and Chief Information Officer of the Office of the Secretary of the Air Force, where he led 4 directorates that supported 77,000 personnel and cyber operations across the globe. Earlier in his career, Lieutenant General Shwedo was responsible for standing up the operational cyber warfare units for the Air Force. General Shwedo is also leading up the efforts for the Air Force Academy's new Institute for Future Conflict. Welcome, General Shwedo. So we will kick off this first question, and I think, Mr. Cherry, I'll kick it off to you first. And then open it up for discussion for the group. Why is investing in emerging technologies now more important than in the past? How has the way research is conducted with advanced technologies changed in the past 30 years?
Well, thank you very much for the question. And again, I'm honored to be on such an illustrious panel, and it's great to be in front of all of you. You know, that's a very interesting question. The way I would start to answer that is we as a society, we as an Air Force organization are heavily relying on technology and capabilities. And that makes us both vulnerable, but also creates an opportunity. I have 4 daughters at home, and if we ever lose Wi-Fi or internet, that's the same thing as losing power, indoor plumbing. It's like a bad, bad day. And that just reinforces the fact that we are so reliant on technology and technology working the way that we expect it to. Now, what that means is that we are vulnerable as a nation, and that means we have to stay ahead of the threat. What that means is we need innovation, and innovation is spawned through ideas coming from the commercial side, certainly from academia, and then obviously from the government as well. And we all have to coalesce and work seamlessly together. I'll say the biggest change in need over the last 30 years from what I've seen back, you know, when I actually had hair coming out of the academy, is the need for speed. The speed of innovation is absolutely critical. And I say that for a number of reasons. One, pure threats. China, Russia are not slowing down. I'd say the global climate change, that there's a need to respond with technology to that need, that threat to the way that we're living. I'd say the fact that we are in worlds where pandemics happen, and the medical technology has got to work at the speed of the threat. And that means we have to coalesce and integrate as a team. And I think that's probably our biggest opportunity and how I'd start off. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest changes is, all right, one of the biggest changes I see is how attainable technology is, and there are so many small little companies, right? So what I do now is I've kind of gone from the big company, big government, down to a small, almost startup company where what we're trying to do is take a technology. So in our particular case, it would be launch. We're making it fast, responsible, daily, all the time, everywhere. A launch isn't once every couple times a year. It's every day, wherever you want it, when you want it. And so what I see is how attainable it is in making things affordable on a smaller scale. So what used to be large technologies, large capabilities are now coming down to anybody, anywhere, but it also goes both sides, right? So that's the thing, is like we have that capability and so does everybody else, but it's a matter of how attainable and easy and affordable new technologies are now, and it changes daily.
First of all, I don't know what I'm doing here. I should be at the kids' table. This is this is really cool because these guys have hit so many of the points that are spot on. But the first part is, you know, in the past, there was a vast divide between the commercial sector, and actually the Department of Defense drove a lot of the leading technology pieces. That's not what's going on now. So from our standpoint, we are pulling as opposed to pushing a lot of the technology. Another thing is the vast divide between the people that were operating the systems and the people that were producing the systems. That divide's gone. They're in the foxhole with us. So often when you saw that with the tanker transport software, where it was taking them, you know, days to do things. Now they push enter and it immediately comes out. And what it was The operator was sitting next to the acquisition folks, and they were saying, change this, change that, and it's working really well. The last part is we've got to get out of the way of a lot of our smart people. And the good news about my previous life was I'd travel all over the world, and I would meet cadets, and their tails were wagging. They couldn't wait to see me. And they were like, sir, I got to show you this. I got to show you this. And I go, okay, what's up? He goes, sir, your software sucks. And I'm, great, thank you for that. All right. And I go, okay, what do you mean? He goes, well, first of all, sir, when this event happens, it happens on a place on the planet. It doesn't come out and text like this software does. And he goes, second of all, the onus is upon me to figure out what this event means in the grand scheme of things. And he goes, and then the last part is you generals always want PowerPoint presentations. I go, okay, so you've got my attention. And he goes, okay, first of all, Airman so-and-so is really good with maps. So when the event happens, it shows me on the planet where this happens. Then second of all, he's really good with correlation functions. So now we have trends for the past 24 years. And he goes, and then lastly, he converts this raw data into PowerPoint plants, and it produces your slides immediately. I'm like, I love you, man. Because all I'm thinking is, oh my God, this would be millions of dollars. And there's no way I would be able to get each one of those licenses to these outstations, and he's just pushing it for free. And he goes, do you want to know what I call it? I go, yeah, what do you call it? And he goes, he goes, it's going to be hindrance. And I go, okay, how'd you come with hindrance or Stonewall? And then he goes, it's Stonewall. I go, cool, how did you come up with Stonewall? And he goes, because that's what's going to happen when I show this to my boss. It's going to get stonewalled. And honestly, that is where we've got to pull these curmudgeons in between, because generally you'll find the very high and the very low get it. And it's the curmudgeons in between. And usually I would end my talks with, we need to kill the curmudgeons in between, because these guys will produce things, and we really got to get out of their way to produce a lot of these things. And what's beautiful is they can make things fast on the fly, and that is going to be the OODA loop in the fight, to be able to change a 1 to a 0 to be able to get after these folks. So anyway, I'm going to be looking for the kids' table. So.
Well, let me just build on what you said, because I think that's a great point. And just going back to the speed discussion, if you think about whether that innovation's happening with smart airmen in the Air Force, whether it's happening with small companies, it's how do you get that moving and leverage to actually create capability. One of the biggest learnings I had was the power of essentially the economy to drive innovation. If you think about Silicon Valley and everything like that, I had no idea that coming out of the academy. And I think if we allow those sorts of mechanisms to work, that speed can happen. Don't know quite how we do that, within like the military complex, but that's something that we got to think about as a team.
General Shwedo, to kind of continue on what I think all of you touched on, what do you think is different about the future of warfare compared to 50 years ago?
We've talked a little bit about it. Speed. If you're in a dogfight, speed is life. So you are seeing everything collapse so much faster, and there are so many more available opportunities to be able to close down your decision link. And that has always been an advantage for the United States. Our folks have been able to think on their feet. And what's a bit disconcerting is you're looking at the Chinese who, stereotypes are awful, but when you look at the regiment system of their education, they don't invite a lot of opportunities to think on their feet. So they're all in on AI. And AI is all about closing down that decision link. And when you start looking at microsats and all of these other things, you start going, this could be very scary if we don't do it right. Also, and Mark hit it right on the head, with great opportunity comes great challenges. So we are reaping the benefits of lots of great opportunity, but we're also finding out that the bad guys watched us after Desert Storm and were looking for back doors. and they were doing kind of a dual-pronged attack. They were looking for asymmetrical attack accesses into the United States, and then they were also looking for parity, but they knew that would be a long-term investment. Well, they started making these investments 20 to 30 years, so we're starting to see the parity investments coming there, but we're also, and it's more insidious, we're also seeing the investments in the asymmetrical attack accesses with things like Colonial Pipeline. Okay, so Colonial Pipeline, very few people know, we were about 3 days away from not having any gas anymore. You shut down this country quickly. They have not been able to affect the United States in the past, and now through these asymmetrical attack accesses, they have. So for people that don't know, does anybody know who does defense for pipelines in the United States? Actually, it's the TSA. It's the people that go through your luggage. And it fluctuates between 1 and 14 people. And what we're trying to do is change some of the laws to be able to get Cyber Command and Department of Defense to do something. But what they're doing is exploiting our laws to be able to go into us. So go back to Lieutenant Shwedo in Desert Shield. You know, the first things they said was turn the lights out in Baghdad. Okay, we know how to do that. We can target different places, and we can actually make it down to a small set of targets to be able to turn the lights out in Baghdad. And then we did the same thing during Allied Force, turn the lights out in Pristina. Don't believe me, the Secretary of Energy has already said that our electrical grid is vulnerable to attack from cyber. So once again, great opportunity. We're able to do all of those things, but we've got to start locking these things down because they figured out how to turn the lights out in Washington, D.C. And we've got to make sure that we always understand with great opportunity, there's great challenges, and back and forth, and never lock yourself down into, oh God, always me. There's always going to be an opportunity. You just got to open up the aperture and start looking at it.
Yeah, I'll add to that. You know, I've had the pleasure of running a small UAV company called Aurora Flight Sciences. And our specialty was on automation, robotics. How do you use robotics to create capabilities? And then a big honkin' defense firm like Boeing, right? And I've seen, you know, the differences on speed of innovation and, you know, fundamentally the ability to create capability for the warfighter, because that's really what it's all about. One thing that I think that we ought to really think about is how do we prototype, how do we test, how do we speed up, you know, creating a capability? That's something that I think is an opportunity for us that we ought to be thinking about, because you're right, that the threat is definitely there. And I think about what the Chinese and the Soviets, so the Russians done, and it, especially in the space domain, right? Especially in the space domain. That, and I know that's your specialty, but it's scary up there.
What I like about small companies and stuff is the risk tolerance is higher, right? And so as far as innovation and developing and creating answers to some of these challenges, small companies have a little bit higher risk appetite. So having come from, you know, military and then NASA and then Boeing and then small company, what I love is, you know, we sit in a room and it's literally me, the chief engineer, the head safety guy, and the company CEO, and we sit down and talk about something. We got a problem, we solve it, figure a way forward. What's our appetite? What will we take? What will we not take? And you basically make a decision right there in the room and move forward. And part of this is the small launch, you know, accessibility, which allows, you know, our goal is to make it where you could launch anytime, anywhere, you know, daily, weekly and stuff, which now you take your vulnerability from one massive asset out there in space that's, you know, your entire communication is wrapped around. You take that and you spread it out into 50, whereas like, yeah, we could lose 10, we're still fine. And by the way, if you lose 10, we can shoot one up the next day and replace that. So it's about kind of taking some of those singularity vulnerabilities and spreading them out with the ability to affordably and reliably replace them. Because the biggest thing is, you know, it's all it's information gathering, processing, spreading out, artificial intelligence, and a lot of those create these singular vulnerabilities for us. And so it's a matter of spreading those out.
I just pile on real quick on both what they just said. First of all, speeding up capabilities has always been a problem. And if you look at DoD 5000, which is the regulations that govern our acquisition process, it's very much an industrial base kind of organization, and it hinders the progress that they're talking about. I think we're learning from Silicon Valley, and you'll read about additional acquisition authorities that we're getting right now. And we're kind of looking at the DevOps model. So often when we would buy software, after we bought it, we go, oh, hey, we gotta plug in some security on here because this is Department of Defense. That is the worst way to do this. You'll never secure it. So what it does is you now with a DevOps model, you run through each step, and before it goes on to the next step, you build in security throughout the process. And that's very much working, and you're starting to see Kessel Run and some other places where they're using these pieces. But the last part, I love your comment about small companies, and it really used to bug me because we would see a lot of innovative approaches from these smaller companies, and as soon as we were interested, they'd get taken over by a larger company, they'd cash out, and all the expertise would go to another company that they were starting up. So what we've got to do is figure out a way to reward the behavior. And quite frankly, those larger companies understand how to do work with the business, and we've got to make it more conducive. The last part, we have to get Congress on board. Congress is not very comfortable with the way we're doing ABMS and others because they're so used to this industrial construct where a widget comes out the end that's fully tested, ready to go, et cetera, when the rest of the world is not doing things that way. So we've got to make sure that we figure out a way to make sure Congress, is happy the way things are going. We just probably haven't done as good a job getting them on board. But once we do that, we can start shifting from an industrial base to thing. But your small business thing has been the bane of my existence. I agree 100%.
Oh, so I got a confession to make. I might be guilty of what you just talked about, of both getting bought and buying companies. I just want to put it out there. That might be me.
I knew it was. I thought I was going to get punched in the chest. Wow.
No, but to your point as well, the big technology leap that we're doing now is moving up to diversification of capability, and it's not one big thing or one big place. And I think about this on my team, even current role making helicopters. We got two big plants. We have one plant that makes Apaches in the United States of America. That is a big target. It just is. And I've asked my team, what happens if we can't use building S-20? What do we do next, right? And how long does it take capability? Similarly, the things that we worked on in FanWorks was diversification of capability, processing on the edge, decision-making on the edge, not needing to go back because the warfighters can't wait for that time lag. You've got to move it up, but that means you have to have confidence that those decisions either being teed up are done in the right way, in a way that gives the warfighters and decision makers the confidence to make decisions on taking out either other equipment or make other decisions relative to closing kill webs. So that is something that we spend a lot of time on. We are in the evolution. I don't say that we perfected it, but it is a capability that not only we're working on, we know our allies as well as the adversaries are very much focusing on.
And it's interesting too, when we go through our planning for testing and stuff, we actually consciously try to avoid military bureaucracy. Like when we go to pick a range, we basically go, so what we do is, so the way we launch, so for Virgin Orbit, the way we launch is we go through the FAA to get our license. We work together on the FAA regulations for, space launch and all that kind of stuff. And then we pretty much go to Point Magoo. We say, all we want is the airspace. We don't want the safety review. We don't want to go, if you use any asset, you bought our whole safety review process. Like, no, we don't want any of that. We just want the airspace. And so basically they give us the airspace. What they do is they turn it over to the FAA. We work with the FAA to block out like a hazard area for the aircraft, a hazard area for the launch, and then we're done. And there's but we actually our part of our thing is to try and avoid, like we want the military contract, but we don't want the oversight and all that other stuff that comes with it, right? And so we basically work through the FAA to get our stuff, but just give us the money for the launch and then we're good. But honestly, it's because once you buy that oversight, it's like, oh, we need a whole team now that understands like how the process works, and so it's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that a funny story. I was down in Texas, old job, and one of the older guys said, "Hey, I'm going to put a $100 bill in this stack of siege rolls that we give the government, and with a note that says, please take this if you actually read this document." Right? 2 years later, he said he came back. Got what they had delivered. That $100 bill and the note was still there. It had not been changed. It had not moved. So it's like we got to be careful what we ask for in the bureaucracy. Really important.
Yeah.
And kind of tagging on to that, and what you said, Colonel Latimer, I'll start with you. What do you see as successful cooperation between the private sector and the Department of Defense? What does that look like going forward?
So I think the biggest thing is the Department of Defense keeping abreast of what's happening in the private sector, right? And letting the private sector know where applications and technologies are coming up with could apply to them, right? So we pretty much, most of the stuff we started with Virgin Galactic, Virgin Orbit was, taking people to space, tourists, but now we're actually flying an Italian Air Force, payload up in Virgin Galactic to get some microgravity stuff at a much cheaper price than any other, launch they could get. And same thing with small satellites. The first thing was the small satellite commercial market, but there's also massive military applications to be able to take an airplane and a rocket and a launch and go anywhere in the world at any time. So I think the biggest thing is military keeping abreast of what the private sector is doing and how it could apply to them, because the private sector is more than happy to say, oh, a small change, this is more applicable to you, and we could have a big business case. That would, for the private sector, that's great.
I'll just roll in. We had it was probably about a year and a half ago, Finland basically turned over their country to us to do a big exercise on command and control. And the French brought their top line Rafale fighter, pulled up, and we, at exactly that same time, changed the codes associated with the folks on the ground, the air liaison officers, et cetera. So the radios didn't work. And we just looked at them and was like, well, okay, I guess you guys won't be able to talk. They came in with a crew of civilians, and it was a team of, so this is a French aircraft, a team of Germans, Americans, and English. And they went through line by line on code and turned 1-0 into a 1, and it started working fine. Now, I got to tell you, if we had that problem, I was shaking my head going, I'm not necessarily convinced we would have allowed that team to crawl over an F-22 or an F-35. And, a long, long time ago, if we ever changed a tape, it went back to San Antonio. We waited for it to come back, and it changed your life completely. In the battle for ones and zeros, it's got to happen that fast. We can't ground fighters or cannot have the comms between air and ground because we've got one missed 1 or 0. So, to point, we've got to figure out how to do more things, because you'll see that more on the outside than in the Department of Defense. And sometimes you've got to figure out what is really classified and what's not, and to be able to close down that cycle that we talk about, because that decision cycle is going to be the difference between victory and death. I guarantee it.
Yeah.
So since you are all Air Force Academy graduates, I have to ask this question of you. What do you all see as the role of the Air Force Academy in emerging technologies?
Yeah, I guess I'll start off. As I said that partnership between the academic institutions, industry, as well as the military, as well as our allies, has got to be there. That's how we work well together. We have to be seamless. But the need is speed. The need is to speed up that innovation and that communication, and we cannot afford to be stovepiped. So I see the Air Force Academy not only creating just great airmen, is obviously the research that's being done as well. Small sats, autonomous vehicles, AI, DevSecOps, all those sorts of things are things that I think the Air Force Academy can help the overall community advance. And I know I've met a few cadets who are in my plant. I know they have the capability. I don't think I'd make it in this year, right? If I had to apply now, in terms of the skill set that those cadets have. But it's really around helping being a part of that community, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I would say it was funny. We were having dinner with some friends last night. We were talking about, our Air Force careers and stuff. And I was like, when I got to my retirement, the retirement was all about, oh, thank you, Kelly, and thank you, you did this. I was like, no, the big thank you is from me. Like, if it wasn't for the Air Force Academy, I wouldn't be sitting here. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. So the biggest thing the Academy does is to educate young leaders that understand military, have a career, and then, stay with it or move on and go private sector. But either way, you always feed back into the greater good, but it's all about the education. And I was a very shy little high school student. Stuff in the Academy forced me to get out there and talk, and taught me how to be a leader. So I think the Academy doing what it does and creating amazing leaders and technology savvy young people is what it's all about.
I just want to roll in real quick. I'll tell you, when I was a cadet, he ran me into the ground. He beat me up all the time. So, quite frankly, I probably had a narrow field of view for the Academy. It is blowing me away. And the dean has grabbed me by the nostrils, and she drags me around all the time, educating me on the differences between when Grog the Caveman was there and what's going on right now. And I will tell you, I want to get these cadets in the game as fast as possible. So when I was the J8 at Cyber Command, that's the guy that's got the checkbook, we sent some money to the Cyber Center, and a patented chip came back in the other direction. It was like, that would not have been me, I can assure you. Another thing that I'm seeing is, a long time ago, we didn't have the security clearances to let them play. So, ma'am, I'm working on the skiff. It's looking better. But believe it or not, cadets have top secret, sensitive compartmented information clearances. So now I can get them into any of these games. So part of my trip here, I went to the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center, and Lieutenant General that's in charge, Mike Rowan, is like, hey, I'll get your guys in the game. Hell yeah. I'm very interested. And then on top of that, after they graduate, I'll immediately plug and play all of these folks. Part of the dean's education for me, I had no idea. Ma'am, is it 16 to 18 patents a year from the cadets?
In the last 3 years.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. And, because it's Air Force Navy this week, we get the most amount of funds, like $60 million. For us to do work for other people. So I want to get these cadets in the game yesterday because they've got a lot to offer, and much different than my experience, but I can assure you they are not only in the game, they're producing. So it's very, very impressive to be around these guys.
Yeah, let me just build on what Shwedo said. One of the things that I find that is a difference, I'd love to get your thoughts. I went to grad school at a Western, Northwestern kind of institution that has an endowment that is huge, but everybody that graduates from there gives back. That's just what they do. And I remember being a second lieutenant, and my major said, hey, you know what? You're going to show up. I don't care if you go to the officers club or not. You're joining the O Club. That's just what you do. And like, yes, sir, that's what I'm going to do. And I did it. I think we need to set the expectation that whatever you can give, you give back, right? Because it's all about giving back. You see these great leaders here, you see the folks here, you see the passion of the great alumni, and it's given back not only in time, but it's also given back to be able to fund and give the dean an opportunity to do more great things and expand. And I think that's an expectation that we as alumni can help set and also support because it's not naturally ingrained. I came out, I'm like, oh yes, government, they got all the funds they want. It's coming from the government, right? So they're good. Not so much. So I think that's something that we as an alumni team can do better to spur on emerging technologies and capability.
All right, well, we have a few minutes left, and I wanted to see if there are any questions in the audience that you would like to ask our panelists while we have some time. Okay, there we go. There we go.
You, Mr. Shwedo. I read a fascinating book about a year and a half ago by George Gilbert called Life After Google, talking about the aspect and influx of blockchain technology. You're talking about a lot of things out of AI, autonomous flying vehicles. Where are we, from a commercial standpoint as well as a government standpoint, aspect of changing over from current technology of processing to more of the faster, rollout, more efficient blockchain technology?
You want to roll or?
Yeah, I could do it. So within Boeing, I'll say, and in the industrial complex, that is something that we are currently doing, have done, and is part of our baseline. Like our whole thing is around speed, quality, speed, and that enables it, right? So agile development, blockchain, DevSecOps, that is what we do on our new capabilities. Now, the challenge we have is we have obviously legacy products, right? And what do you do with those legacy products? What is worth the investment to be able to bring those legacy products up to current standards? And sometimes, frankly, Chad, the juice isn't worth the squeeze, right? In terms of what you're gonna get. Now, the new things that we're doing, especially in PhantomWorks, that was the baseline. And I'll tell you, working with small companies out in Silicon Valley, that's what you're doing. Process innovation is as important as the product capability. Sometimes we think about the new shiny thing, the widget, the thing in space, the new lightsaber, whatever that thing is that we're making. But the process to make that lightsaber is as important. Blockchain is one. Digital thread, as designed, as built, as maintained in a digital environment, is as important, I'd say.
For everybody, blockchain is a different way of kind of managing the books as opposed to having one book. So you've got lots of books, so it's kind of hard to cheat, et cetera. But that's to Mark's point, it's a much bigger conversation. And for the Department of Defense, the past 20 or 30 years, we've been so narrowly focused on Al Qaeda, Taliban, and all of those other folks. Quite frankly, 2 tin cans and a string would work like a champ. When we start talking about shifting towards Russia or China, we absolutely have to do the things Chad's talking about. And you're starting to see more and more in the paper about things like zero trust and others. And another Air Force Academy grad, Chris Inglis, who is the National Cyber Advisor, is pushing a lot of these things. So you've got lots of Air Force Academy behind the scenes working these things. But back to the battle of finite resources, where we are right now is 20 or 30 years of underinvestment on a lot of these things. And you're starting to see in the newspapers things called JADC2, Joint All Domain Command and Control, and all of these. It is to get after exactly what you're talking about, Chad, because we know we're behind the power curve, and you're starting to see a lot of this stuff coming down. And quite frankly, last year, the March before, we had, oh my God, a handful of teleworkers, and all of a sudden they walk into my office and go, "You need to go from a handful to 4 million." And that was because of the COVID piece. And we, in a matter of months, got 4 million teleworkers. So you can do it. And if the resources and the will is there, we can make those shifts. And now you have lots of people going, well, I'm not necessarily convinced I want to go back to the way we did business. And actually, Jay Salvarian and I were on a panel, and he goes, now that we know we can do this, cadets, you're going to hate me, but you've seen the last snow day at the United States Air Force Academy. But a lot of these things are enablers, and they take investment and will. Thanks.
On some things, we actually make a decision to go less smart to increase the reliability, because the more everything is intertwined in a system, the more input there is, the more chance of something failing or failing for a bad reason. So some of the things we actually let's just make this brute force simple. Some things need the technology, but sometimes you don't. And if you don't need it, don't put it in, because it's just going to cause you problems later. So there's always that fine line on how smart you want something to be, because you don't want it to be too smart. Yeah.
All right, we have time for one more question.
Hi, I'm Evan Adosky. I'm class of 2000. Thank you all given that it's obviously a more and more tech-focused world, how do we, as an Air Force, compete for talent entering college for somebody that can go do a lot of tech-enabled things, and a lot of other civilian universities today that might not have some of the restrictions that you all talk about kind of operating within the space?
Just real quick on this. So this is part of the IFC piece, and you are spot on. We're working with the Cyber Center right now to make it cutting edge, because right now we still got some work to do. And to your point, what we want to do is we want to reach out to the people that are aggressive, that are smart, and they want to be a part of a bigger piece, a bigger plan. So the Institute for Future Conflict, for instance, I've got 3 meetings a day with the A5 Futures folks in the Pentagon to make sure that we're getting after the things that they feel are important. So what we do is we go to different commanders and we go, give me your IPL, which is your integrated priorities list. And the conversations I'm having with these leaders is, I'm going to have a postdoc, or I'm going to have a doctor on the dean's staff. So the number one repository for AI doctorates in the Air Force is the United States Air Force Academy. So working with the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center, with the cadet having a TSSCI clearance, do you want to do cool stuff here, or do you want to stay at unclass working something out of a textbook? To me, if I was that aggressive, smart person, I want to get in the game right now. And, my conversations with General Groen yesterday was like, hell yeah, as soon as they graduate, I'll steal them. So if you want to do cutting edge, due to Congress concerned about us dispersing all of these artificial intelligence monies all over the place that really don't acquire anything, we're starting to go, you have to go through the JAIC. And once again, now we have access to plug those cadets into the JAIC. So, for me, that would get me excited.
Any other comments from our other panelists before we wrap up?
You're a tough act to follow, Shwedo. So you get that. You got it all figured out. Talking about like kid table. I don't know what you're talking about. I will say just on the talent front, right? It is, especially now, it's very difficult to get great talent. That is something that we're looking forward all the time. And I think there's something around fostering talent as well. And I would say the Air Force Academy should be doing the same thing. And that goes to not just doing the traditional kind of out of high school, but more kind of growing talent, taking some focused areas, whether that has to do with focusing on diversity and inclusion, whether that's focusing on certain geographies. There's nothing that says you cannot go deeper, meaning high school, junior high, on some targeted areas to help foster what that talent base looks like. And with that connection, those connection points, and making sure that they are, sporting the Air Force Academy colors from the time they're in 6th grade and 5th grade, that's a great in to grow that base. I think, again, we talk about asymmetric warfare. I think asymmetric talent growth and the ability to not do the traditional, this is always how we do it. Think about going deep and vertical and growing that as options for any of the services academies for that matter, as opposed to what we traditionally do. Over.
And it is interesting because a lot of the young, this is post-graduating college, but there's a number of young engineers that I've actually written recommendations that want to go into the military after they basically get out there, they kind of get into civilian life, they're doing something cool, and they see, oh, we're doing this for the DOD, and they actually, so I would say the DoD is actually very competitive because some of these young people come in, they go, oh, and I tell them about my military experience. Like the beauty is you get responsibility right away. You're in charge of stuff and you're leading it. And so I've actually written a number of recommendations for some of our younger, just, straight out of college that want to, go in and have a military career, which was surprising to me because I didn't think I would see that. But that's a kind of a big kudos for the military.
Yeah, just one quick war story. I will tell you, I get a lot of trash about how do you keep all of these high-end cyber attackers inside the United States government because they can make far much more money elsewhere. And I walked into one of my attack squadrons about 3 o'clock in the morning, and they're doing death and destruction on the other side of the planet. And I'm like, oh man, I'm so proud of these guys. And all of a sudden I looked up at the whiteboard and there was all of this math up on the board. And I go, what's up with the math? He goes, oh, Airman so-and-so figured out how many years we go to jail if we did this on the outside. And I go, that's right. That's why we're here. So going back to your question, when you do cool stuff, you want to do this. So when that one person's going to a regular university, go, why are you working on this project? Well, because the teacher told me to. I can sit there and go, because the combatant commander of NORTHCOM says this is his priority that we need to work on. To me, once again, I'll do that. Thanks again.
All right. Well, a huge thank you to all of you for being here today. Definitely appreciate your time and expertise.